What does it mean to describe a covalent bond as a polar bond? So let's be clear that a polar bond is a subcategory of covalent bonds. Polar bonds is a covalent bond between two nonmetals where one of the atoms has a much higher electronegativity and hogs the electron considerably more. Polar bonds are covalent bonds and they are weaker. It's kind of just some pictures out here, kind of determine here. This is an example of a very strong bond and a very nonpolar bond, a carbon-hydrogen bond. This is an example of a polar bond, a weaker bond between carbon and another atom here. Now, to reflect the electronegativity of these two bonds, let's alter this picture a bit here, and then we'll discuss how we determine, that'll show better which one is more polar. So this is our trend of electronegativity on our periodic table. Note that hydrogen is better represented in this trend when it is right above carbon right here. So this carbon hydrogen, let's note the trend as it increases as you move to the right, and it increases as you move up the periodic table here. So carbon and hydrogen are very close to each other on the periodic table. Because this trend is linear, up and down, we can bet that carbon and hydrogen are pretty close in electronegativity because they're right next to each other. They're not identical, but they're very close. So we'll leave these electrons drawn in the center because this can be considered a non-polar bond because they are close to each other. Carbon and oxygen. Here are carbon and oxygen filled in on the periodic table. Now they are farther away from one another. And they have different electronegativity values. So drawing the electrons in the center is not descriptively accurate. So let's kind of fix that a little bit. And we'll put the electrons closer to the oxygen atom because oxygen has a higher electronegativity. Because they are different from each other, they are not close to each other on the periodic table. This is going to be a more polar or polar bond. In summary, polar bonds are covalent bonds that are weaker. Polar bonds can be identified by locating the atoms on the periodic table. Because carbon and oxygen are farther apart from one another, it is a good bet that that is a more polar bond than comparing it to a bond of atoms that is closer together on the periodic table. Thank you.